we'll get a couple of them hopping in while we're going. But so were you guys able to go back and view that video of the meeting from December when Ian walked us through some of this client completion report stuff?
Yeah, I did, and I got all my inventory loaded up.
All right, it looked like Jesse up at Bragg, one of the Jessies was saying something, but we got a little bit of feedback there, so we couldn't quite hear. Okay, so I guess let me just start with this, just so that we're all on the same page about what we're doing here and why we're bothering doing this. So the question, why in the world are we using, or why do we need to think about this client completion report? Basically, there's two reasons that we're going to start with. There's a whole bunch of other reasons that are also associated with it. Oh, it looks like Burl joined us, so we got somebody from Housing Authority. But yeah, so two main reasons why we're starting to talk about this client completion report. The first one is this. We've added a new field to the BWR. And it's this one down here in the big red box. It says audited MMBTUs saved. And what that is so when you run your audit, it will tell you how many MMBTUs or millions of BTUs that we're estimating that we're going to save on that client's house. But that's based on whatever blower door numbers you told the audit that you think you're going to get. In reality, we don't always get what we think we're going to get, and we also don't always get to do every measure that we think we're going to be able to do. And when you're done with the job, it sometimes looks a little different than what you estimated, what you thought it was going to look like. What we really want to know is what your actual MMBTUs are. We want to know how much we're actually saving on the home. And by running that client completion report, it will tell us, it'll allow us to make the adjustments that happen during production. It'll allow us to actually put in the actual blower door number, and it will create a number of actual MMBTUs saved. Now, I do not remember, or I do not know if we're going to use this field to put in actual MMBTUs, or if Brad is going to put in an audited MMBTUs and then have another one that says actual MMBTUs. But before we can really get actual MMBTUs, we got to get somebody at every agency trained up and able to run the report, because that whole report process, it generates the actual MMBTUs. So that's the first reason why we're looking at this report. The other reason why we're looking at this report is what's highlighted here in blue. I don't know if any of you guys can remember last fall. It was the most exciting class at the weatherization training that you attended. But I did a class called How Does the Audit Affect Me? And we talked about some of the federal rules that kind of were foundational to the program. And the very first rule that we talked about is the second reason why the client completion report is so important. And so this rule, this just comes from the federal rules. It's CFR 440, and it's like section 21D. but I summarized it here, or actually didn't summarize it, I quoted it here. And it says that each individual weatherization measure and package of weatherization measures installed in an eligible dwelling must be cost effective. These measures must result in energy cost savings over the lifetime of a measure. And I don't know if, hopefully some of you remember a little bit of this. We talked about how we use the audit to generate an SIR, which tells us whether or not the measures are going to be cost effective. Well, keep in mind that the audit is it's the estimate part. The audit is the part we use to go in and say how much do we think this job is going to cost, and then this client completion report is going to show us how much the job actually did cost. And so when someone from the federal government wants to come out and determine whether or not each individual weatherization measure and package of measures was cost effective, they will not look at the audit and what we estimated it was going to cost. They want to look at what it actually cost. And so that's why when we come out and we audit, I started this last year. Basically, I started looking at everybody's file, and I wanted to know, can I go into your file and determine how much each individual measure actually cost? Not what it was estimated to cost, but what it actually cost for each one of those measures. This is an example from Housing Authority. They use subcontractors. Anyway, this is just what they were doing. And this worked. This helped me to basically be able to determine, okay, they did tank insulation. How much did the tank insulation actually cost? Well, they pulled something out of their inventory, and they had an invoice from one of their contractors. So between those two numbers, the total cost of the tank insulation was actually $62. They estimated it to be $70, and it gave them an SIR that was greater than 1. So at a $62 cost, I can look at this and I can immediately see this measure was cost effective because it cost a little bit less than what they estimated, and when they estimated it, it had an SIR greater than 1. This one's a good one here, the infiltration reduction, because they had an SIR of 1.1. They estimated the cost at $219. Their invoice cost plus their inventory, so their actual cost was $218. So yes, this measure was cost effective. It met the rule that each individual weatherization measure must be cost effective. And then the other thing is, did the whole package of measures, was that also cost effective? And that should also be reflected here. As long as all of our measures were cost effective, on an individual basis, then the accumulative SIR was also above a 1, and so we're all good. Anyway, so this is the second part. Basically, we need something in our file that shows that every one of the measures was actually cost effective, and we would like every agency to begin using the client, I'm going to butcher the name of it, report a million times today because I can't remember what it is, but the client completion report. The client completion report will actually give you this list, so you don't have to generate this, in an Excel spreadsheet, and you don't have to do it separately. If you'll use the client, or if you'll use the audit and use the processes in the audit, then it will spit this out when you're done. So those are like the two main reasons. And then I put this question here, does this include labor? For this agency, it does, because they have subcontractors, so the invoice cost usually is the labor. Sometimes it's labor and materials, I think. I don't know. But either way, one of the things that you need to think about for your agency is, does whatever you are doing include labor? And the answer for this is that it must. In order for us to really determine whether or not each measure was cost effective, the measure has to include labor and materials. So by using this client completion report, when we're all done, it will include labor and materials. So those are kind of the two main reasons. There's, as you go through this, I think you'll see a bunch of other benefits to it, I hope. But I just wanted to kind of start with that and just say that is one of the main, or the two main reasons that we're working on this. So anybody have any questions about that or concerns before we?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
How do you figure if it's cost effective or not when it's an NAM and there's no SIR?
That's a great question. So when we do an NAM, are we using any DOE money?
No.
No. So the federal rule that I just showed you, that rule is for the weatherization program. And I think this is something that you'll hear us kind of harping on a little bit for the next while, year or two or three. We really need to mentally separate the two programs that we're running. We're running a weatherization program and we're running a crisis program. I still struggle to separate them because we're gonna use the audit to run both of them, unless you're doing a crisis job completely separate. But that's where it becomes really, really hard to keep things separated. So the federal regulations that I just showed you, those pertain to the weatherization program. So when we run an audit, the measures that are going to show up on the audit that fall under the weatherization program are going to be our energy conservation measures and our health and safety measures. Anything else, anything that's a non-audited measure, that all ends up under the crisis program. So great point, great question. The rule does not apply to the non-audited measure, but at the end of the day, we still need you guys to be itemizing what those actual costs are for the non-audited measures so that we can look at them and report on them accordingly. When you guys do a crisis BWR, you need to know what the actual costs of those of that crisis measure or package of measures was. So by running this report, it will give you that information as well. Did that help at all, Scott?
Well, kind of. But when you replace the furnaces in NAM in a regular weatherization job, it's almost like you're saying you just need to do a whole separate deal for that because it's going to be your total job cost on there and everything. So I don't know. It's kind of confusing.
Yeah, and that is. Are you saying because we're running the furnace on the heating tab, but then we're putting our thumb on the scale and saying this is going to be a non-audited measure, but it's including it in the MMBTUs and everything kind of gets blended together and it's very hard to separate it all?
Well, you're doing it as NAM. Say it's a 60% pilot light furnace, so we're just going to, and it didn't audit, but we're going to replace it because that's what we do. The NAM does not show up on the MMBTUs when you do the need audit because it's an NAM, but the cost of it's going to be on the bottom line. So you're showing the cost of it, but you're not showing any payback for it. That's what I'm wondering.
Okay. So as we work through this, let's keep that one in mind, and let's figure out how we put a furnace in as a measure, and let's kind of follow that one through the process and see what it looks like at the end. And let's see if we can figure out how to solve any concerns we have with that measure. And so along those lines, what I want to do, I want to get this group started down the path of using the client completion report. And in order to do that, from Ian's video, there's a whole bunch of little pieces. There's a whole bunch of stuff we kind of have to do to get started. Hopefully some of you have started. For those of you who have not, what I wanted to do today is I just want to kind of start walking through the process. Now, I don't know much about this process. I have not used it. I have basically tried to muddle through some of the steps that Ian outlined in his video. So I am by no means an expert on this. I suspect that many of you on the phone call will know more about this than I do. My goal is that we just start working together as a group and learning how to use this. I'm sure we're going to make a handful of mistakes along the way. If you guys see me making a mistake as we're walking through this, I'd like you to speak up and say, hey, if you do that, it may mess this up, or if you do that a different way, it might work out better. But anyway, and as we go along, if you have questions like Scott's, let's see if we can kind of go through a process and figure out how to make what he's talking about work well so that we get the effective results, so we can actually get the information in the audit appropriately so that it will show up on the MMBTUs and things like that. So with that, what I did, and you guys tell me if you think this might help or not, if I can find it. Gosh. So I went through Ian's list of stuff, or I went through his video, and I just tried making like a step-by-step list of things to do. And I just followed the order that he went. He started by doing some agency information setup, and then he did some contact setup, then he set up his cost centers, and then he set up his supply library. That one's a big one. And then he got into the setup library, and then he created some work orders, and then it actually generated that client completion report. So I was thinking for this morning that we as a group could just start right here, and I'd like each of you on your own computers to open up the audit, and let's just start going through each of these steps. And in about a half an hour from now, we'll see how far we've gotten, and we'll stop, and we'll kind of set an assignment for everybody to work on over the next maybe 2 weeks, and then maybe we'll have another one of these calls and see if we can meet back together with our assignments completed, and then figure out how to move forward. Would that work for everybody, or does anybody have any other suggestions or ideas that we could do to learn this?
It works.
All right. And anybody else, feel free to chime in if you want. So I will share this document with each of you. I probably should have done it before we started, but I'll once this meeting's over, I'll share this with you. So if you want to go back and walk through it, you're also welcome. Like, this is a Google Doc, so for those of you especially who are familiar with Google Docs, if you're going through this list, if you have a question, you can use the comments thing and put a question there, or if you want to just add to this, feel free. Like, I'll share it and make it editable so that you guys can make comments and make any changes, so that anything that might help the group, feel free to modify this document. But okay, so and then for those of you who, I hope everybody got through Ian's video a time or two, but the goal is, and I apologize, this may be extremely small on your screen. Anyway, next time I'll try and mess with the resolution, make it a little bigger, but this may just be small on your screen. But The whole goal is that when we're all done setting everything up, that you could basically click on clients. And that's, if you've been trying to figure out how to get into the client completion report, I think the only way in there is to click on clients, go to the client, and then down here on the report section, hit the drop-down menu and select the client completion report, and then you can preview it. And I'd recommend that you take some time to read through this report. Right now, I don't think this report, the one I'm showing you, is going to have a lot of information on there, but when we're all done, and or if it, this does have a lot of info, but the info may not be correct. When we're done, the MMBTUs, that total number, that's what we're after there. And then also, and this isn't going to look right now, but basically here's that breakdown of every one of the measures: materials, labor, total. So I can go back through and see how much everything actually cost. So that's our goal. Our goal is that when we're done, we'll actually have a report that is accurate. But in order to get there, we have to do a whole bunch of other stuff first. So let's just start with that first step. So the first thing that Ian recommended that we do was to go into the agency tab and set up our agency information first. So just on so I'd like each of you to do this while we're going through this video. That way, if you're clicking on something, if you have a question, turn your microphone on, ask the group, and let's see if we can kind of help each other through all this. So first one, we're going to just make sure our agency information is set up. So home screen, you're going to select agency, and we're going to fill out the information on the agency tab. So click agency, and this should be your agency. So put your agency's name right there. If there's any of you who are new to the NEAT audit, one of the things to bear in mind is that the boxes with the dark black box around them, or the fields with the dark black box around them, they are required. So you can see that the name and the state would be required here, and nothing else is required. But I would recommend that you put in your agency address and a general phone number. But if everyone will put that stuff in there, and then either in the chat or on the phone, let me know when you're done.
I'm done.
Thanks.
Yep, I'm good.
We're done.
All right.
We're done as well.
Okay. I think that was at least the majority. So next thing is we're going to go into contacts. And he recommended that we use the contacts tab to create contacts for all of our agency's employees and contractors. He said to list field staff as crew, the auditors as auditors, contractors as contractors. The contractors, we may modify that. And some of this are my notes, so Ian may or may not have said this exactly. Sorry. Optional, if you want to print separate work orders for different crews, create a contract for each of the crews you want to use. So for example, air sealing, electrical, HVAC, and so on. So, right here under agency, under contacts, you want to create a contact for everybody in your agency, and I think there's other reasons for that. But for right now, we want to create at least 3 contacts for our for our different work order types. Now, basically, I'm going to switch to the subform view. So I'm just hovering here in the gray area, and I'm going to click on my right mouse button, and it just brings up this option to change to subform datasheet. And I'm going to switch to that so that I can see, because right now I have 7 of these contacts, and if I switch to the subform datasheet, it's going to show all 7 of them. So if you'll make sure, whether you're in subform datasheet view or whether you're in the other view, I'd like you to create at least these 3, the work order for electric, work order for HVAC, and work order for crew. You could call that air sealing or crew or whatever, but I'd like you to basically create a contact for an electrician, an HVAC, and then just your weatherization crews. And I want you to assign those as a contractor. So make sure that that box is checked, and then let me know when you guys are done.
I'm done.
And I'm going to switch back and just looking at the screen again. Just put in so these are the fields, that name and your company. The rest of the stuff is really not that important. It is important though that you put the pager number down. Make sure you have everybody's pager number so we can beep them. That one just cracked me up. That just shows you how old the audit is. And what I found was by having at least these 3 contacts in, when we get into the part where we can build a work order, and making sure that these guys are listed as contractors, they'll show up on our work order list. So maybe one of our assignments might be to go in and create the other contacts for just specific people in your agency. But honestly, I haven't gotten far enough into it to know how valuable that will be. All right, I heard a couple of dones. Everybody else okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. Okay, the next step was to use the cost centers tab to list our grants or our contracts. I'm assuming you can get more specific if you're trying to keep like an old LIHEAP contract separate from a new one. You might be able to like list, LIHEAP 2016 and LIHEAP 2017. But for right now, let's just start out simple. If somewhere down the road you feel like you want to separate those out of your agency, by all means. But anyway, let's start here, and then I think you'll be able to determine if it's valuable for you or not to do that. So we're going to go into cost centers, and we're going to create these cost centers. We're going to do a DOE health and safety and a DOE program or program support, whatever is easy, whatever you want. LIHEAP crisis, LIHEAP health and safety, LIHEAP program support, Dominion Energy, and RMP. And again, I hope that just the process of going through this will start to help us all wrap our heads around and keep in mind that, so we're running a DOE program, so we use DOE health and safety, program support, LIHEAP health and safety, LIHEAP program support, and then we run this other program called LIHEAP crisis, and we also have these other funding sources. So anyway, so let's go into the cost centers tab, and I think you can use this to put in you could actually use this to keep track of how much money is left in your grant. The only problem is that it's really, you'd have to do a fair amount of work on the side to keep track of that, because your grant's going to be like, here's $100,000, but then, you know, some of that's admin, some of that goes to cover, you know, your insurance costs and things like that. But if you actually had a breakdown of your grant and you knew how much was budgeted for program support and health and safety, I think you can put those in, and then as you assign measures to this, it will subtract from that total and help you keep track of what's left. But for right now, really all I'm after is that you go in and put that title. I'm going to switch to the subform data sheet. So all I did was I put in a cost center for each of those things. So DOE Health and Safety, Program Support, Dominion, LIHEAP, and Rocky Mountain Power. So again, let me know when you guys have those all in.
Have it done.
All right.
Mine's done.
We're done.
All right.
We're done.
Okay. All right. The next step was the supply library, and this was really the big one. But basically, I guess one of the things I hope we can keep separated or not get too confused about is the supply library is totally different, from the setup library. You know how I come to your agency and I want to see your setup library change log, and I want to make sure that we're using the appropriate setup library and we're not making tweaks or changes in there without recording it, because that's how we can show that we're treating everybody the same across our whole program. The supply library is totally different. I never check on this because you can change this on a daily basis, and it's not going to affect how we're estimating stuff. So just bear that in mind. It's okay to go ahead and change stuff in the supply library. But the supply library, that's where all your, you can use this for inventory if you want to. I don't know how effective it is, but you know, you can look into that aspect of it. So Ian suggested just using the construction and materials hardware tab and putting everything on that tab, because he said it made it easier when you open up your, so I'm going to open up my setup library, and you can create user-defined measures in the setup library. And basically, I think he was saying that it makes it easier when you're trying to grab something. You can just select that one category on everything, the construction materials. And then when you're looking for a description, it's going to pull up, is it a description? Oh, you can copy it from it. Basically, it just allows you to pull everything from one big general list instead of having, you know, a whole bunch of subcategories and stuff. So obviously you can use all the different subcategories if you want, but what he's doing makes sense too, to put everything under one big list. Now on this one, is there people out there who have nothing in here?
Yeah,
We
Matt,
have
we're doing that yet.
plywood.
Sorry, go ahead.
So,
We have just 3/4 plywood in it.
okay. So that's where I kind of want to start. Like, I'm going to assume that some of you have absolutely nothing in here. So our goal is, for this next step, is to put some stuff in the supply library, and then what I'd like to do is go into the setup library and create a user-defined measure from including all the stuff that we put in the supply library. So what I was thinking we might do is, let's take just an ASHRAE fan. Let's take like a regular, a Panasonic exhaust ASHRAE fan. And let's put materials in the supply library so that we can go into the setup library and create a user-defined measure for an ASHRAE fan, and we'll be able to select all the materials from our supply library. So with that, I need your help, because I don't know what is included in an ASHRAE fan. And I can't find my list. Okay, so I started a list here. For an ASHRAE fan, and ignore the setup library heading. That may be a little deceiving. So I started a list. If we're going to do an ASHRAE fan, and I took from Ian's list, and this is how he's writing it. And there is probably some, this may be a good method. You may find you have a different method for listing them. But one of the things that he did was, he said, you know, they put everything in alphabetical order, and if you look through his list, which the stuff I have in here is a copy of his list, but if you look through his list, it's all, you know, it's in alphabetical order, but also just kind of thinking about things. They've listed adhesives, aluminum pipe, you know, so you can kind of, you may want to give some thought to how you're going to list them. You may categorize certain things a certain way, but once you get a standard list, you know, you'll want to kind of follow that. But I could see them. I can see the how this would be very helpful to have, you know, all your B-Vent stuff in a certain spot. But
I have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
So did that automatically just generate alphabetically, or do you have to input it alphabetically?
That's a good question. Let me see something here.
I think on that, when he does his data dump and dumps all his inventory into the Excel sheet, he probably sorts it from there before he dumps it back in, maybe, but I'm not sure.
That might be. So let's add a couple of things, and then we'll find out if it does or not. The other thing I can do is let's not even worry about how to do the data dump thing for right now. We're just going to kind of skip past that. Like, I think that part is very valuable, but what I'll do is I will send a list. I'll send this list of Ian's to each of you after this meeting. So if you want to look at it as a reference, you can. If nothing else, it may be good to go through and think about, oh yeah, you know, we have those materials too. What do we want to call them or something? But anyway, I like that he said it was in alphabetical order, but let's find out if it actually puts the stuff in alphabetical order or not. So let me ask you guys, if we were going to install an ASHRAE fan, what are all the materials? This is my list so far. I have the fan itself. I have an electric switch, some wire, some duct, which I'm assuming this is the rigid duct. And then I got flex duct to basically insulate the rigid duct. And then we need some sort of a roof termination. There may be some screws, fasteners, or caulk. I'm not sure. You on the line, or Jesse, or anybody who can kind of tell us what needs to be on this list, or what doesn't need to be on this list?
Yeah, you need some roof.
Okay.
and then just some fittings, usually for the duct, elbows, and stuff like that.
What kind of duct do we use? Like, is it just galvanized or what? It's supposed to be rigid, right? Aluminum?
Yep.
It's like a PVC.
Aluminum or PVC? Yeah, when I put these on my house, I did PVC, but I haven't paid close enough attention to what we're actually using out there. And then is that typically 6-inch or typically 4-inch?
Typically 4.
6. Come on.
So if you're doing a roof, like if you're trying to squeeze it into the gable vent, then I've seen where it ends up being 4 inches. But if you're doing a roof termination, then 6 inches better on these Panasonics, I know. But anyway, so we needed some ducts and some duct elbows. And then is flex duct the way you guys insulate them, or do you use some other material?
Yeah, flex duct or FSK.
Or FSK, okay.
We use flex duct.
And then I didn't really notice if Ian's actually putting screws and stuff on there, but one of the things I thought was interesting in the video, you guys can determine whether it's useful or not, was that like he gave us an example of a furnace and he basically said his agency puts all of the materials into a bin and they pull everything, and then I'm assuming that they take everything out, and then when they come back, they look at what was not used and kind of delete it from the list. So I was thinking about taking a similar approach with this and just saying, okay, let's make our list of stuff. So let's do that. Let's take this list of stuff and let's put it into our our supply library. So I'm going to open up a new supply library so I can do this with you guys. And if you have an existing supply library, you may want to create a new one so that you're not messing with anything your agency is currently doing. And then once you've got a good handle on this, you could switch to the new supply library. But and then make sure it's assigned to your agency. And then I'm just going to go into that construction materials hardware tab and I'm going to start adding stuff. So I noticed on Ian's he had like a bunch of fans and they all ended up under, you know, alphabetically the first word was fan. So I'm just going to copy that. And then he was using the model number on the Panasonics, which made sense to me. But whatever you guys want. If I could type and talk. And he had just had the units was each and then the cost in there. And his cost was $131. I don't know what you guys are buying them for. You're welcome to put whatever you want in there. As far as the electrical, is it just a switch and some wire, or are there other, like, I'm assuming there's a switch plate as well, or how should we enter that in as a material?
There's usually a switch plate for about 39 cents.
So we'd enter that separate. Oh, and then Ian said he was putting in their item numbers, which I have not been able to make sense of how he's numbered stuff. So I would say for now, leave those off, but that's what I was putting here was just his item numbers. But that makes sense to me. If you have an inventory number and you guys are familiar with that, you may want to add that to the end of your naming convention. But so I'm just going to put electric switch for 44 cents a piece, and electric switch plate for 39 cents. That sounded good to me. And then wire, I don't know if would you use 12-2 or 14-2 or anybody with electric?
Depends on what size the breaker is attached to.
Gotcha.
12-2 is a safe route.
Okay. I noticed on his list that he only had 12-2 listed, so I wasn't sure if that's all they stock or what, but. And then I also was wondering, in order to wire the Panasonic fans properly, is it just a 12-2 wire, or do you need any extra wires in there? And
It depends.
he was using linear foot. So I guess the main idea here is if there was a way to kind of package the measure up, we'd want to try and, if somebody was actually going to pull all of these things out and put them in a box for the crew to take out to the job, we just want to think about exactly what you'd want in that box. So I got wire. So is it duct or vent? What's the appropriate name for this?
We call it vent pipe just so we know that it's for vents.
Okay. So maybe alphabetically you might choose the name and start with that. And I'd just go some 6-inch aluminum. And then would you do that by linear foot or by each piece or what? Do those come in like 5-foot lengths?
You have to do it by lineal foot or your inventory gets all jacked up.
Okay, so linear foot. Anybody got a guess on what that would be per foot?
About $1.10 or 99 cents, something like that, depending on what it is.
We'll go ahead and put it in as that. Obviously, when you guys I think this is going to take a while, your own setup library, but you'll want to make sure that your costs are in there accurately, obviously. So, and then what kind of elbows and stuff would need to go in the box? Are they like adjustable or they just come in 90s and 45s?
If they're PVC, they're 90s and 45s.
How about on the aluminum? Are those the ones, the adjustable ones?
I think they're adjustable.
Yeah, adjustable 90s.
So some sort of naming convention, and what do those cost? $4 or $5 or more?
$288.
$288 a piece. And then some flex duct insulated. So maybe I'd put duct So it would show up in my list and then flex. And then they were doing that per linear foot as well. About $1.25. What's the appropriate name for the roof terminations?
Roof termination, that's what we have.
Okay. And are there different types of roof terminations, or is this like, would the one for the fans have a different name than something else, or would you just call it a roof termination?
That's pretty much good because you have dryer terminations for dryers and soffit terminations for soffits.
Anybody got a guesstimate on price on this one?
About $20, a little less maybe.
All right. And then, how do you put the duct together? If we're doing aluminum, is that tape or screws or?
Tape.
Okay. So this would either be tape or glue, is that right?
Yep.
So would that be duct tape? I hate to use that word. What's the tape
You
called?
can use aluminum.
The foil grip or mastic tape. Butyl tape.
Okay. And you may just put that under tape or something, but I don't know. However you want to categorize it. Maybe I'll put under tape. Would you cost that stuff out?
We do it by the roll because once you use it, it's hard to tell exactly how much you used or what's left.
So what's that a roll? Isn't that like $10 or something?
Yeah.
And so if you've got glue and if you're doing PVC, you know, by all means do that. How about the roof adhesive? Is that like Lexel or what do you guys use for that? What's that called?
We use a Henry's roofing cement caulking tube.
Okay.
$9 a tube. About.
$9 a tube. So I don't know if you put it under caulking or adhesives or what you do, but something like that. And then we need labor. And this is one I don't know what the best answer was for. I didn't notice if Ian was if he put labor on his construction materials or if he used the labor tab. On the list that he sent me, I could not find labor on his construction materials. So let's try using the labor tab, and then once we get into it, you may determine which way you want to go. So I'm going to switch over to the labor tab, and there's probably you may have a couple of different categories for labor. If you would just have, you got like one crew that goes out and does all of this and their labor costs are pretty fixed, then by all means just have one type of labor. But you know, if you have multiple crews that do different things, you may have an HVAC technician that in general makes more money than whether your weatherization technicians or electrician may make more money or whatever. So on the labor tab, you know, break that up into however many categories you need to. bear in mind that when you're putting in your labor cost, that needs to be the person's wage plus all of their fringe. So, you know, I'm going to put down here, we're going to have an electrician's labor, and I'm going to put them at about $35 an hour. Maybe it's higher, maybe it's lower. But that's going to represent their wages plus their fringe. If you have a subcontractor, if they have a flat rate per hour, that would be easy. If you have a different structure, this one may be a little more complex for you. And I don't know if you'd have the electrician install all of this, or if you just have an electrician come and install the wire part. But anyway, so is there anything else on our list that we need for to put in our supply library to create a measure for an ASHRAE fan?
You could probably double that contractor label though.
Okay. Yeah, if it's contractor labor, it's going to be a lot more.
$70 at least.
Yeah. And so for any of you who are contractors out there, you know why it's so much freaking more. Because you get to pay for insurance and everything else that goes with it.
Yeah.
And you still can't make any money.
So we have two laborers. One's for our guys, which is, you know, $20-something an hour, and one's for contractor, which is $65 an hour.
Gotcha. Okay, so now that we have some stuff in our supply library, let's go into our setup library, and I've got to change, make sure you're pointing at the correct supply library when you get in here. And let's create a user-defined measure. You may have a bunch of them in there, but I'm just going to create a new one. And we're just going to call this ASHRAE exhaust fan. If you have multiple different ASHRAE strategies and you want to get more specific than that, by all means, go for it. And he said that you can use like the measure type. If you want to categorize it here, you could select health and safety. But I didn't put together where this shows up later. Maybe it'll show up when we generate our work order. It'll already be categorized. I don't know. But so this is a health and safety measure that we're creating right now. So in fact, in keeping with our other standard, the first three letters of this should be HSM and a dash and then ASHRAE. And it's going to be active, but we're not going to include it in the SIR, and there's no energy savings associated with it. Just regular health and safety measure. If you wanted to put a default crew on there, you know, you could grab your, if you knew you were always going to have your, where's my electrical? I think. Anyway, did we make a category for, yeah, electrical? I think I have a different list showing up because I grabbed a different setup library, but you could do your default contractor and pick your electric contractor, and then you could do your default cost center, and this would be your DOE health and safety, or you could pick LIHEAP health and safety, which if you wanted it to default to that. That's where you're going to want to have a little bit of working knowledge with whoever is in charge of making sure that you're spending out your contracts properly. just knowing, you know, whether you're going to cost something to DOE health and safety versus LIHEAP health and safety. Really depends on which contract you're trying to spend down. And then let's try and create the materials here. So if we select construction materials and we select to copy from the supply thing, then we should be able to just go in and pick all of these items. So we would need one fan. We would need the electric switch, the switch plate, our wire, some duct. Where did I put? Oh, vent. Put it under vent. The elbow. I probably should have changed that to vent so it was all uniform. Some flex duct to insulate it. Oops. My roof termination. Some tape. And then labor. So labor is going to be our labor category. And apparently I didn't put any labor in the right library. Oh, I just didn't click past it. There we go. So, and then you probably need to adjust some of the quantities. So wire, I don't know. How much would you send out each time? Like 25 feet or something? Maybe 10 feet of vent. Maybe 3 of those elbows. And maybe 25 feet of flex. 1 termination, and then how many hours for the electrician?
Two.
Hopefully 1, maybe 2.
All right, we'll go ahead and put it down as 2. So this is saying we package all those or put all those together and send them all out, right? So now we have this health and safety measure that has all of the stuff in. Would we need any, how do you connect the insulation flex to the stuff? Do you use zip ties or something?
Conduit straps.
Yeah, so that would also need to be listed here. But anyway, so we created that measure. And the next step, and this is probably a good place to stop for this week. Next step would be basically to go in and generate a work order. And when we're generating, I think when we're generating the work order, before you generate the work order, you're going to just select this measure. So if I was going to go into an audit, when I'm doing my itemized costs, if I have an ASHRAE fan, I should be able to just select, and this one's not, let me change the supply library, or my setup library on this one. Oh, I'm going to have to change my, oh, it should be there. Setup library. My new supply library, okay. So if I go into my itemized cost, shouldn't it come up under my user-defined measures here?
It should.
I feel like this is not pointing at the right something or other here. Setup library. Which setup library was I in? Setup library. Well, I'll have to go back and look and see what I've done wrong. I probably have too much stuff going on here in my database to keep all this straight, but hopefully now that we created that, you could go into, basically the whole idea is that if we put all the right stuff in, then when your auditor is generating their audits and they're selecting from itemized costs, then they can pick this stuff and it will show up with all of the appropriate materials. I don't know how it works for like just your regular measures, like your energy saving measures. But at least for your itemized costs, this part makes sense to me. So, and then what are you guys getting if you, can anybody actually go into an audit and assign that itemized cost or assign that measure that we just created as an itemized cost?
I tried doing it too, and it did the same thing it did to you.
Okay. Anybody else having success?
Nope.
I would have to do a whole new audit because this new supply library I've been playing with, I haven't got on any audits yet, so I can't use it. It's not on any existing audits.
All right, so let's, what's something we can work on? And I think I'd like to do this more often than every 2 weeks. I think we're going to need to kind of get together for a few weeks and work through this, but I have a bunch of training next week, so I know I'm just not going to be available next week. So we'll have to try and find a time the following week. Does the morning time at 8 a.m. work for everybody?
Works for us.
If we do this one?
Yeah, that works.
And let me just check my calendar really quick.
So Matt, quick question. So
Yeah.
does that mean I got to create 2 separate setup libraries and 2 setup supply libraries since I've been doing audits for Mexican Hat?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess it depends on if that office has a bunch of different things down there that you wouldn't have up in price, then maybe you would. Maybe you could find a way to use just the one setup library, but differentiate between what is in the one place or the other. But I don't know enough about it. I don't know enough about how you use it as an inventory control system either to say whether you want it in one library or two. But
Okay.
maybe we can find that out as we go along. So we had a question about NAM furnaces, and that. What's something we can work on for the next 2 weeks? What do you guys feel like should be the next step to move forward? Do we need to spend some time like actually going in and putting in stuff in the supply library, or do we need to move forward a little bit more so we have a better idea of how to put stuff in our supply library?
I've already done that data dump thing. It actually wasn't that difficult. Took a
Yours
little while
worked pretty
to
good.
Yeah, I got all my inventory in there already, but
Okay.
I just need to start doing some new audits and using it before I get too far.
Okay.
So when you dumped it, did it automatically go into alphabetical order for you, or did you have to put it in alphabetical order when you did it on the data dump?
I put it on the data dump, but actually we had so much old stuff in there that the numbers for our libraries, they were just all over the place. So I actually had to sort it by the library number in order to put them all in one place just to see them. It was kind of a mess at first, but I can't remember. Our inventory is numbered, so I ended up somehow sorting it by the number, so it's all numbered the way we have our inventory numbered. So I did sort it somehow, and then when I put it back in, it kept that sorting.
I just opened up the new supply library that I created here, and I did not put them in this order. I started with the fan, so it's just putting them in alphabetical order.
Yeah, and I think that's because mine's numbered from 100 on down, and it's sort of, that would be alphabetically, basically number-wise.
Gotcha. So should we focus on getting stuff in our setup libraries? Because I think that one's going to take a little bit of time where we can't really get back together for a couple of weeks. That would probably be a good thing to do. And then so September 4th, we're going to have a technical meeting from 8 until 9. The Monday the 3rd is Labor Day. And then the rest of that week, I'm also doing training. So 2 weeks from now, I'm available on September 4th. Would you guys like to do this meeting right after the technical meeting? Or will that screw up your day too much?
It's all right with me, I guess.
Or if
Be okay with us.
If you wanted to, we could jump on at 7 a.m. and do it before the technical meeting. 9 a.m. it is?
9 would be better for me.
Okay. I'll send you guys out a calendar invite for that. So our assignment between now and 2 weeks from now is for everybody to try and get all of your materials put into your setup library. And then if you guys want to, like, feel free. This is about as far as I got with the instructions anyway. Did I say setup or supply? Our goal is to do a supply library, right?
Yeah.
Supplier library.
If you pull up Ian's video, what I did, and just kind of had that on one screen, and then had my thing going on a separate screen, and just kept pausing his video and doing it sort of step by step. He walked you through it pretty good, and it was pretty easy to understand.
Yeah, so please, by all means, like, work ahead and, see what you can learn. But at a bare minimum, let's everybody get your supply libraries set up if you can. Yeah, any questions or concerns on that?
Hey, I do have another question, just to add to your list there and it might be a couple meetings from now when we cover it, but so say a furnace pays back or something, it's not going to generate that list because it's not an user-defined measure. So I guess, do we have to do a user-defined measure even if we have itemized cost, even if we have a payback on something, just to generate that list?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing, so that's a great question. See if we can address it. So our assignment for September 4th is just to get your supply library set up. Okay. And then if you get working on this and you feel like, the next thing for us to work on in the meeting would really be helpful would be this or that, like, feel free to either come to that meeting ready to talk about that or send me an email and say, hey, could we work on this? I'm kind of wondering if it would be more beneficial to skip over the whole import-export thing and just work on some of the next steps, or if everybody's getting hung up on the import-export, if we want to spend time on that. But so if you guys get working on it and have any feedback on it, then let me know. So anyway, thanks you guys for participating. I'll send out a link to the recording to the whole group, and I'll send a copy of Ian's list as a reference, and I'll share this document with you guys. So, and I'll try and keep it under an hour next time. So, anyway, let's go ahead and end there. You guys have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.